So we have to understand what's going on in the soil. These are classified in what's described as a soil biota or family. So bacteria is one of the first or lowest levels if you want to do a trophic pyramid scale. Lots of them in quantity, but they're very small. And then they get eaten by the next levels up the pyramid. So bacteria attach themselves to any surface. They can even attach themselves to make nodules of bacteria. Organic matter will decompose, and it's fed on root exudates. So what the root exudate is, when the plant undergoes photosynthesis, it makes sugars, okay? And it trades sugars to the bacteria, and the bacteria trades the minerals, okay? So I'll give you minerals if you give me sugars. When we trim the plant, like a legume tree, so if we were to coppice or pollard a legume tree, and we take away the foliage, what happens is we've taken away the production of photosynthesis for a period of time. So the tree can no longer trade the sugars to the bacteria. So they lose their food source and they die. And that's what we say, the nitrogen fixation, because the bacteria are made up of, their bodies are composed high in nitrogen. So when they die, their bodies decompose, and then the tree can take the nitrogen up, and it uses that instant to help regrow the leaf, which is high in nitrogen, that's why it's green. And then it starts to produce photosynthesis again, and then the colony of bacteria then regrow. Okay? So bacteria store, release, and cycle nutrients, especially within the root zone. They decompose toxic organic chemicals and secrete glues that bind the soil particles to form aggregates, which is called polysaccharides. So when they do that, it's like their waste or their poo is sticky, if you will. And then when we see compost, or we describe the crumbly nature of compost, it's the polysaccharides that holds that together. An interesting test is to take compost, really nice compost, put it in a thing, pour water over it, and the water drains through, and it comes out pretty much clear. And you go to take like soils that don't have living stuff, and you pour, and it comes out like chocolate milk, because the polysaccharides hold the organic matter into the soil. So when we don't leach as much of our minerals through our soils, so that's called flocculated soils. So a soil that's flocculated has polysaccharides because it has a good bacterial level. When we put synthetic chemicals in agriculture, over time they kill all of the bacteria within the soil, and so the soil doesn't make the glue that binds the soil together anymore. So that soil becomes deflocculated, and it collapses basically. And at that point, when the rain comes, you get erosion, and you see all the mud going down the hillside. Because that happened because there was no bacteria flocculating the soils through polysaccharide production. So fungi, well, they are mainly decomposers, mutualist or pathogens. Many can digest awfully synthetic chemicals, meaning that, what does that mean? Well, if we think about fungi or bacteria, they can sometimes do the kingdoms, right? They could eat, for instance, plutonium. So we could take plutonium waste and feed it to mushrooms. When the plutonium goes through the mushroom, it comes out as a different chemical composition. It would no longer be radioactive, for instance. Okay? So mycorrhizal strips are nutrients from organic matters, and they transfer them vast distances. So this is our mycelium network. Okay? So how the mycelium will take the mineral, and there's some type of exchange or communication between the mycelium, the bacteria, and a tree. So whether this exchange is like what we think about voice or resonance, so is it a resonant communication, or is it electrical communication? So for me personally, I would see it, because we're going to later see what's called the cation-ion exchange, that the plants, the soils and the plants, these things are transmitting or speaking with electrical charges. So the electrical charge is their communication, and that's how they can do that. They move it with electricity. Just like we move atoms through electrical cables, then you use it on the other side, right? It's the same concept. So what do those look like? Let me see if I grab some. So this is mycelium. So if you see the darker brown part, that was the what we call substrate that we prepared, food. We inoculated here with the grain spawn. The grain spawn is now eating its way and colonizing the substrate. Once the bag completes, maybe another 2 to 3 days max, this will be colonized. We'll move the bags, Sunday, we'll move the bags to the grow house. We will open the bag, right? And then with the right water conditions will happen. So the mycelium, or the white stuff, that's what we're speaking about here, and that's what's moving the mineral from here. So it takes the mineral from here, moves it, and then comes out as a fruiting body, and or we'll trade it with the bacteria. Okay? So we'll play with that later. Protozoans, they live in the water. So these are like, if you look under soil and you look at the water from soil, it looks like crazy animals, like they're like, aliens or something swimming around. So they live in what's called pore space. So they live in the water molecules that are adhered surfacely to the pore space within aerated soils. Since they feed on microbes, so they're eating the bacteria basically, they mostly live at the root zone. So they like to eat, because they're bigger, they like to eat the microbes that are exchanging with the plant. Maybe call them something like the police. And they release nutrients in the soil stored in the microbes. So when they eat the microbe and they manure it, the nutrients that were being transferred from the mycelium can get released into a water-soluble form, and the plant can take up that without exchanging sugars. So some of the nutrients are from the exchange of sugars, but a lot of the nutrients are just because the protozoan eat the bacteria that are trying to exchange sugars. So some get eaten. So that brings us to a larger thing, the nematodes. These are tiny, tiny worms, basically, but really, really small, only on microscopic level worms. They live and they may move in the soil, water, so they're bigger and they swim around and they basically try to eat protozoans. They release nutrients when grazing, so they kind of swim around, eat the things, and this is the trophic pyramid, so you have the smaller one going up, and each time these are reduced by a factor of 10. So it's a very interesting thing that all food or trophic pyramids in the world use base 10, and that our math system also follows base 10. So that's also tied to where we saw the Fibonacci sequence and the decimal system. It's interesting that he figures out the Fibonacci sequence, and he also creates the base 10 decimal system, because that's the base of how nature transmits and condenses nutrients at a base 10, or the metric system, that level. So they release nutrients when they're grazing, especially nitrogen. So larger than that, we start to see things that we could actually see. So we start to look in the soil and we see like bugs and millipedes and things like this. So insects, spiders, mites, millipedes, etc., roly-polies, even as witchetty grubs or the large rhinoceros beetles, these type of things. They need healthy soil, contains many of these species. They graze on the bacteria, fungi, and decomposed organic matter. So if you see these, it probably means that there's a lot of what you can't see, because it takes what you can't see to produce the food for what you can see. Balance the food web by controlling populations. So none of the, say, lower populations can get out of balance, because the predators, or predator-prey relationship, each time we go up the scale of the pyramid, it reduces by a factor of 10. So for instance, if there was 1 million bacteria, okay, the next that we go up, we drop a 0. So we go 1 million to 100,000. 100,000 goes to 10,000. 10,000 goes to 1,000. 1,000 goes to 100. 100 goes to 10, and 10 goes to 1. Maybe one human standing on 1 million bacteria, or some scale like that, right? Oh, wow, that puts us on top. I thought we were in the center, right? Okay. Earthworms and potworms. So, I like my worms. So they ingest organic matter of all sorts, as well as microbes and other small animals. So they eat the soil and go through it, and they're eating functionally everything. They're more abundant in lighter, loomier soils than in heavy soils. They don't like super clayey soils, or those treated with synthetic chemicals. So if you use synthetic fertilizers, you will kill the worms, and then it goes down, and then basically if you kill the bacteria, there's nothing. So that functionally, probably more so what happens is they don't like it, because their body's composed mostly of water. So if you ingest synthetic chemicals, it's not going to be very good for you. But also, the synthetic chemicals mostly kill the bacterial populations, and that feeds the whole web, and then everything dies. You go to the soil, there's nothing there. So the plant, yes, can take up water-soluble. Also, when we give too much fertilizer to our plants in a water-soluble form, the plant stops the relationship. It stops giving the the sugars to the bacteria. So even in an organic sense, we have to be careful about applying too much synthetic, synthetic meaning that we produced it, or what we might call water-soluble, because the plant will stop relating to the bacteria. It'll only relate to the water-soluble nutrients. So that's how hydroponics works. They're just feeding the plant with water-soluble nutrients, so there's no relationship. and then they get it to a certain extent an increased growth rate because the plant doesn't give the sugars, so it keeps the sugars for itself. We'll later see the percentage of sugars that each different type of plant, so I keep referring to the different successional levels of plants. Each one has a different relationship to the soil. So they bury and shred plant residues. They stimulate soil activity by consuming organic matter, mixing and aggregating the soil. So they make, again, the polysaccharide soil structure. They increase the drainage, so they're tunnels, and air. Air is very important, so they make air holes and water. And they increase the water holding capacity, the enzymic capacity when they pass through. And they make what we call the worm casting, okay, the little worm poo, holds water really well and about a factor of 10 to 1 over just normal soil. So 10 times more retention in castings than we would find in normal soils. And they provide channels for root growth. So a root will find the worm channel and grow down, and it's easier on the plants.